to the ideals he set forth, offer furniture for all Chicagoans, including a variety of styles and price points, and provide service to all who enter our doors, including in-store and in-home design assistance. We look forward to welcoming you into the Smith family, just as we have since 1945.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
The act of murder, whether in fiction or real life, has long enthralled us.
We're dealing with a murder here that was particularly horrendous.
Historian Lucy Worsley traces our fascination with killers on A Very British Murder.
Sunday at 7 on WTTW.
On Masterpiece.
Douglas, I think our marriage might be over.
So, trial separation?
Except not a trial.
We should still go on holiday. We'll have this last summer together.
Us on Masterpiece.
Sunday at 8 on WTTW. Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Mollenhauer Progressive Philanthropic Fund in honor of Ida Mollenhauer, supporting quality journalism.
Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Paris Schatz has the evening off. We will be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. City Council critics blocked a plan to give civilians, rather than the mayor, oversight of the Chicago Police Department. In a bid to win more support, Alderperson Harry Osterman this morning introduced a revised version of the ordinance, but Alderperson Chris Taliaferro says the change came too last minute.
That represents a lot of negotiations by advocates for this, with a lot of giving and taking.
This is the people's ordinance that you guys have wanted me to bring to vote for quite a long time.
A raucous meeting ended with no vote on any measure changing supervision of the CPD. This despite a since-abandoned campaign pledge from Mayor Lori Lightfoot backing a grassroots oversight plan. More on our website. Residents of Rockton in northern Illinois can return home now that a disaster order has been lifted. Anyone within a mile of Chemtool Incorporated had to evacuate Monday when the chemical plant caught fire. The State Environmental Protection Agency cautions residents to toss food or water left on counters as it may have been exposed to dangerous particles. The EPA also warns no touching debris or ash, and that includes pets and children who want to play outside. The state's testing water from nearby Rock River. The Sun-Times reports that there are concerns a private company fought the fire with a foam that contains a toxic chemical. Chicago is launching a new program to expand transportation options near CTA, Metra, and Pace stops. The Equitable Transit-Oriented Development pilot program will support 10 community projects. An emphasis is on projects that will create affordable and pedestrian-friendly projects, such as on the south and southwest sides. Applications open Tuesday. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Greg Pratt of the Chicago Tribune, Greg Hines of Crane's Chicago Business, Atavia Reed of Block Club Chicago, and Maudlin E. Hajirika of the Chicago Sun-Times. Let's get right to it and talk more about that empowering communities for public safety ordinance that was geared up at long last for a committee vote. Instead, well, I described it as raucous. Greg Pratt, what did happen?
Well, you have two warring factions trying to debate over what to do, and neither one really has the support that they want and feel comfortable with. So they wanted to kick it and block votes. And so everybody just blocked the vote on an issue that the mayor said was a 100-day priority and that the city council and the mayor just can't come together on.
Maudlin, have we ever gotten an explanation from Mayor Lightfoot as to why she has backed away from that promise for civilian oversight of the CPD? I'm afraid we can't hear you, Maudlin.
Sorry about that.
There we are.
So, yeah, no, we really haven't. You know, Mayor Lori Lightfoot has backed away from several campaign promises without giving an explanation. But I think it really just boils down to she politically now does not believe it's expedient. And she doesn't want to lose the control.
Greg Hines, how long can she hold off on this? If she doesn't want to lose control of the Chicago Police Department, is it inevitable at this point?
Nothing is inevitable if you have this big of a split. The core problem here is that there's legitimate differences of opinion on this. The police and police supporters think one thing, community advocates of police reform think another thing. The mayor, to some degree, is in the middle. She can continue to waffle if she wants. The question is what the political complications will be. And perhaps the mayor has an eye on what's going on in New York City, where the mayor's race there, which will be decided in the next few days, is centered in large part on public safety issues. Maybe she's going to read a message out of that. I'm not sure.
Let's jump to that. That spike in violence does have Chicago on edge here. And when questioned about the mass shooting in Englewood earlier this week, Mayor Lightfoot bristled at a reporter's question about the perception that Chicago is unsafe. Take a look.
I'm concerned about the families who will be forever scarred by the loss of their loved ones. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what my primary focus is as a mayor of the city. Obviously, perception matters, but what matters most is the people who right now are in the hospital fighting for their lives.
Now, this, even as a WBEZ analysis finds that Chicago is home to more mass shootings, and that's defined as shootings with more than 4 people, than any other city. And as we have ABC 7 reporting that a CPD police officer owns the home where that mass shooting in Englewood took place. So, Atavia, can you tell us anything more?
You know, what I will say is that community members are reeling from the shooting that took place. Speaking with people, they did not expect this to take place. One thing that they want people to know is that this is not the norm for Englewood, although it's what you see. It's a place where people get together, communicate, focus on having a good time. So right now, the priority is focusing on, how to come back from this tragic event and how to boost what Englewood can be and not what tragedy has struck the neighborhood.
Greg Pride, it feels like we're constantly having to return to this conversation about violence, about shootings in Chicago. What do you make of the mayor's explanation?
Well, she's right that, a question about, are you concerned about the perception of violence? The first thing is people's families and centering what's happening in a community, good and bad. But one of the really astonishing comments she made there was when she said that the city is safe and that she stands by that. And that is not a perception that a lot of people have. And that's something that crime is up over last year, and crime last year was very bad. And so the city needs to get that under control. It's struggling with reform. And so you have a problem where you have a lot of street violence and guns and weapons and conflicts. And then you have a police department culture that doesn't have trust with the community, which makes it harder to solve crimes, which makes it harder to prevent violence. And there are just so many problems right now on a public safety front.
Maudlin, jump in here, please. Is Chicago safe?
I am going to step out there and say that Chicago is absolutely in a place where safety is not the word I would use. Chicago, Mayor Lightfoot, Chicago is not safe. In certain neighborhoods, Chicago is not safe. Let us face that fact, Mayor Lightfoot. Chicago is not safe. And something needs to be done because people are held hostage in their homes.
What can be done? Anybody, please speak up here.
Listen, solving crime problems has vexed mayors of this town for decades now. The mayor is right when she says that crime is up all over the country in big cities as a result of the pandemic, which has kind of loosened the rules. But ultimately, people are going to judge this mayor at re-election time on whether they feel safe. And the problem is that crime is just as bad as it ever has been in minority neighborhoods, but it's lately has split into other neighborhoods that didn't have this kind of problems, mostly white, particularly this carjacking thing, which has occurred in almost every neighborhood in the city. That has people absolutely scared to death. What we do about it is a long conversation. We're not going to solve tonight, but if somebody doesn't come up with something soon, people are going to start looking for a political figure to blame.
And meanwhile, we have Anjanette Young, who was falsely subject to a CPD raid prior to Mayor Lightfoot taking office, blasting the mayor for trying to dismiss Young's case against the city. Now, you cannot watch this video, I think, and not sympathize with Young, who was naked for much of the time. Tavia, what is the Lightfoot administration up to?
You know what? That's hard to say. Can anyone really, say that? I don't know what direction that they can go in now, but what I do know is that they need to work with the community and with the public to find a way to make sure, one, that this doesn't happen again, but also, to be honest, to find a way to realign themselves with the way people see them nowadays. Because especially with this case, how can you trust the mayor after something like this?
Well, and Greg Hines, go ahead, please.
I was going to say it's really becoming quite clear that Mayor Lightfoot, will change her mind on a dime, depending on the politics. We all know that when Anjanette Young was in the news, she was very, very clear that she was sympathetic. She understood this was unacceptable, and she would work to make this woman whole. And all of a sudden, as soon as the headlines disappear, her administration is trying to renege, is trying to get away with not compensating this woman in a manner that the courts or whoever will decide that she needs to be compensated. But these are the sorts of things that have been happening. It all depends on the politics of the moment with this administration. Look at Juneteenth. Last year, it was, we can't do it. There's too many holidays. This year, the state of Illinois was a week away from declaring it a state holiday, so it's politically easy to say, by the way, we changed our mind. We're going to make it a city holiday. So many things are depending on politics with this administration, and that needs to change.
It seems like Lightfoot can't get away, particularly, again, Anjanette Young, just given how powerful anybody sees that video and I think would recoil at that experience happening to them, being sprung upon by the CPD like that. Greg Pratt, you cover the Lightfoot administration in City Hall. Is she constantly changing her tune, and how does she respond to the allegations of hypocrisy?
Well, of course, she would dispute the allegations that she changes her mind, and so let's just note that for the record. But yes, her administration will speak about values and then do something else. She supports an elected school board, and then she doesn't. She supports the civilian oversight plan, and then she doesn't. In both cases, there's issues of power. In the Anjanette Young case, it is pretty telling. I don't doubt what the mayor said about the horror she felt watching the Anjanette Young video in that situation as it unfolded. But once it was out of the news, her law department is fighting very vigorously with Anjanette Young, and the mayor said she was going to make that situation right. And so, I think it's a little unfair to say to imply that she doesn't have principles, but they will. The administration does lack consistency and follow through.
Amanda, you asked what it's going to take to remedy this situation. One of the absolutely critical things that I think everybody who's followed this believes is that you have to restore confidence and trust between the community that's being policed and the police. People have to trust that the cop isn't going to beat the whatever out of them, but is out there to protect them. That means true accountability. And when you have a case like we're just talking about, or this seeming switch of position and inability to come up with a compromise on civilian oversight, it postpones the day when the community has confidence in police. This is not a good situation.
No doubt.
And one of those that has also been brought up is, of course, the elected school board, again, a case in which Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, has changed her tune. So she had maybe a win today on staving off the public safety ordinance. She didn't want to go forward, but not so much when it comes to getting her way with an elected school board for Chicago Public Schools, because Governor J.B. Pritzker does say that once that bill reaches his desk, he does plan to sign it into law. So, Greg Pratt, how stinging a defeat is that for the mayor?
Oh, it's major. It's first of all, there's other people who, there are people who have mayoral ambitions who have been talking about she's allowed the state legislators to take away one of the major powers and responsibilities of being mayor of Chicago. It's a huge deal. It's something she opposed. It's something that the mayor of Chicago does have absolute power over. And whether that's a good thing or not, it is a thing. And now it's about to be taken away. And it's, the mayor was talking about how she wasn't at the table for some of these negotiations. And people are out there banging their heads saying, well, why not? How could you not be? Why? How did you let this happen that you opposed? And of course, there's the double hit of she supported it before she opposed it.
Maudlin, how do you foresee an elected school board changing how CPS functions?
An elected school board is going to mean that the citizens of the city will have an input on how their schools are operated. And I think what you're going to see is a movement toward equity. Equity lens is the words of the moment, and in every other sector of our society. Everything is being looked at through an equity lens. And I think that you're going to see a school board that will begin to move toward an equity lens on funding, on staffing, on programming. Community members have complained for years that they are inordinately targeted in communities of color. And so I think that you're going to see, them begin to take back that control and say, okay, we're going to fund the programs that have been completely gutted out of our schools. And we're going to make sure that our teachers are not scrambling to pay for notebooks. And I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to see a movement toward equity across the board.
Tavia, Black Club is an outlet that's really focused on community reporting. So when you are in the community, what are you hearing about this? Are parents hopeful that this will improve their children's education?
I think something that's been touched on before within this administration is the lack of accountability and transparency. And I think that's what people are looking for in all sectors, whether it be crime or education. And I think what parents, families want right now is to just know what's going on in their child's school, know what their child is learning, know what they do have and resources they don't have, honestly. So I think that they are excited to potentially be able to serve on a board where they can share their experiences, share their opinions, and be able to get the resources that they need in their neighborhoods.
Greg Hines, and yet when this measure did pass just this week in the Illinois House, there was a whole lot of talk, even from legislators who say they support the concept, that it wasn't ready for prime time. They're calling for changes, for example, to campaign caps for these races, maybe even downsizing the board. Is that realistic, or given how long it took for this bill to get to this point, is this going to be the plan?
The chief sponsor of the bill, Representative Delia Martinez, said
Ramirez, Delia Ramirez.
Yeah, said that put a brick on the bill to use the Springfield Parliament. She filed a motion to reconsider, which means that it doesn't go to Governor Pritzker's office. And Speaker Welch from the House said that this would allow for a little bit of negotiation between the advocates and the mayor's office. But I think in the end, most of the changes, if there are any, are kind of going to be on the margins, might affect limits on campaign finance. The mayor was concerned that board members get a big fat paycheck. She doesn't like that. There may be something done, although what it is, I'm not quite sure, to help non-citizens, particularly Latinos who have kids in the school but don't have a voice here. They can't vote. They can't run for it. But I think the core of the proposal. A 21-member school board with 20 people elected from single-member districts, the chair elected citywide. I think that's going to stay. The freight train is moving down the tracks. There's too much support for it. It's not going to change.
Giving all of us more races and potentially quite expensive and volatile ones to cover this, as you had Governor J.B. Pritzker just yesterday signing a law that is going to change the primary date for next year's election. Now, meanwhile, speaking of new laws, both the U.S. Senate and House passed, we've got it now, a law marking Juneteenth a federal holiday. This is right after the state of Illinois also made Juneteenth a holiday for state workers. Here is what Vice President Kamala Harris said at the signing ceremony.
National holidays are something important. These are days when we as a nation have decided to stop and take stock, and often to acknowledge our history.
Tavia, what does this mean to you? Is Juneteenth a liberation of those who were belatedly enslaved, something that you've been celebrating or commemorating previously?
Yeah, I mean, I've celebrated Juneteenth with my family for as long as I can remember. It's something that's been ingrained in my upbringing. But politically, I see it kind of like putting the cart before the horse. I feel like, you know, commemorating the holiday, celebrating is extremely important. But there are so many issues that need to be addressed. And, you know, signing Juneteenth into legislation is important, but it's kind of like wanting to rename Lakeshore Drive DuSable Drive. Like, it has meaning. It is important, but there are other steps that need to be taken.
Like what?
And these, I don't know. I think that people need to communicate with the community to figure out what issues are happening, whether it be with CPD, speaking locally, just different issues that people of color, Black people especially, experience every single day. I think those conversations need to be had, and these are things that are being done to try to make up for that. And while it is important, I feel like other things most definitely need to take place.
I totally agree. You know, it's a wonderful thing that Juneteenth is now a federal holiday. And it's a wonderful thing that Juneteenth is now an Illinois holiday. And it's a wonderful thing, Cook County and Mayor Lightfoot, that you have seen fit to make Juneteenth a holiday in the city and in the county. But what about poverty? What about disinvested communities? What about crime that is holding residents hostage in their communities? What about lack of community centers for youth who are going the wrong way? What about all of those things that we can attribute to structural racism, including the health inequities we saw with COVID, all of which must be addressed and will not be addressed by making Juneteenth a holiday? So one of the things that a lot of us are saying is, okay, this is wonderful, but let's not get it twisted. Juneteenth is not the solution to structural and systemic racism that runs rampant through American society and the racial reckoning that we have all been engaged in since the murder of George Floyd.
Agreed.
And, you know, because the renaming of Lakeshore Drive did come up, I do want to bring up that road and go down that road, I guess I should say. So, Greg Hines, this is set for a city council vote renaming Lakeshore Drive in favor of Jean-Baptiste DuSable. This is even a couple of aldermen are out with a survey saying that a majority of Chicagoans don't support it. I'm going to ask you to make a prediction here. Is Chicago due for a change, if only in name?
Oh, it's dangerous to make any final predictions about the city council these days, so I'm not going to do it. I'll stick to the facts. Alderman Moore, the sponsor, David Moore, claimed that he had the votes lined up to get this thing through before at the last city council meeting, but it was deferred and published, which is a technical way to kick off the thing until the next meeting. Since then, two other aldermen, Brian Hopkins and Brendan Riley, have come out with a poll that they took. Reputed company, good reputation, says that most Chicagoans don't favor, even Black people. Only 48% supported it. And Alderman Hopkins the other day said that he thinks that some of the supporters have fallen off. We'll see. The mayor seems to be really not in favor of this and in favor of her alternate proposal to honor Mr. DeSable in a different way.
So we'll be watching.
This is a real emotional issue. There's going to be lots of twisting. I hope it doesn't get too ugly when they debate it. I can't predict it. It could come out either way.
Right.
It's going to be a pretty interesting meeting. And, I think if it passes, the mayor might very well veto it, which will be interesting.
Something that we haven't seen in a while. Now, another emotional issue, particularly for fans of the Chicago Bears. Team might be looking to bear down, or north really, to Arlington Heights. So, Atavia, is this just a negotiating tactic to wring more city paid for improvements to Soldier Field? Just briefly.
I'm not quite sure. I don't know that, but what I do know is that the Chicago Bears need to stay in Chicago. This might be the one thing that, Lori Lightfoot said that I could kind of nod my head to. They need to focus on it.
Focus on beating the Packers, she said, right?
Yeah.
Any brief insight there, Greg Hines?
It is quite possible this is a negotiating ploy. There's certainly things the city could do, and the Park District, which owns Soldier Field, could do if they wanted to help out the Bears. More signage, for instance, maybe even signage rights or naming rights at Soldier Field, although that would create quite a stink. The core problem here, though, is that the field itself is obsolete. It's the smallest stadium in the NFL. It doesn't have a lot of skyboxes. That goes right to the bottom line of the Bears. And as we all know, professional sports, above all, it's
really a game
a
of
business.
money above any other game. And Greg Pratt, I wanted to really briefly, before we have to go in just about 30 seconds, of course, a tough week at the Chicago Tribune with, I think I saw about 24% of journalists now that under Alden ownership taking buyouts. Anything that you can say to people about what that means for civic life in Chicago, real briefly?
Well, we're losing a lot of outstanding journalists, and that's going to hurt our ability to cover the city. But we have a lot of outstanding journalists who are remaining. We're going to continue to fight, and we hope you'll stick with us.
And I am glad that each of you who have joined me on this panel are going to be here to continue to cover what goes on in Chicago and its surrounding environs. And with that, we are just about out of time. So special thanks to Greg Hines, Greg Pratt, Atavia Reed, and Maudlin E. Hajarika. And that is going to be our show for this Friday night. Don't forget that you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Then 6 p.m. Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. As a housing crisis looms in Chicago, local organizations on how they're helping keep families in their homes. And a Juneteenth celebration. We go on a walking tour through a cemetery to hear the stories of some prominent Black Chicagoans. Then Chicago Tonight is back at 7 o'clock next week. Now, for the Week in Review, I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford